Is there enjoyable news when it comes to Hedera that recently came out? Well, personally for me, I think it is enjoyable in my perspective, even though I can't speak on anyone's behalf. And what is that? Not too long ago, Hedera announced something that I think is very amazing. Take a look at, for instance, Hedera Council member Aberdeen partners with Archax and Lloyds Bank to enable RWAs to be used as collateral, the UK's first use of digital assets in this way. Now, take a look at, for instance, right? Archax. Again, it is allegedly the UK's first regulated RWA exchange. And again, if we take a look at enabling RWAs to be used as collateral, the use case first use of digital assets in this way, I think could be argued as groundbreaking. Again, when I take a look at the United Kingdom, when I take a look at RWAs, man, this is something that really excites me because if we take a look at RWA tokenization, let me kind of explain this real quick because RWA stands for real world asset. And if we take a look at RWA tokens, they are digital representations of physical assets on the blockchain. Now, what sectors could this be used for? Arguably, I would say real estate. We take a look at stocks, we take a look at bonds, we also even take a look at art. There's also a bunch of other possibilities, but then I think you get the point. When it comes to RWAs, I think as of right now, it is kind of an up-and-coming niche of a market, I would say, because, for instance, we take a look at a very famous project out there called Ondo. That's heavily focused on RWAs. We take a look at something called Zebic, which isn't as popular as Ondo, but that's also, focused on RWAs. So I think we're kind of beginning to see this trend. So I like this as of right now when it comes to Hedera. And is it just me or just kind of feels like, as of late, Hedera has been announcing a lot of things. And I don't mind though, because I do like projects that update to the community. I like projects that kind of showcase what's going on, as opposed to a project that maybe has a lot going on, but they don't want to announce it. This doesn't feel like that to me. So this is, again, something that I find enjoyable for me because I like seeing updates when it comes to stuff like this. And even though when it comes to Aberdeen, it may be a Hedera council member, we have to think about the other members when it comes to Hedera. And I think that really kind of showcases the level in which I would say that is. Like, for instance, we take a look at Hedera's governing council. One of the members do include something like Google. We take a look at LG, Ubisoft. I mean, that's very popular. And also, just to kind of talk about, the United Kingdom, we take a look at another, governing council member of Hedera is the London School of Economics. So I think all of this right here is just very intriguing to me because when I think about Hedera, I don't necessarily think about it as kind of like something that has the, hype or like the kind of cool factor that some other projects may have, like for instance, some, meme coins and whatnot. But then I do think that Hedera is very amazing nonetheless because why wouldn't stuff like this, again, what I talked about in the beginning of the video, why wouldn't this type of stuff be coming out maybe when it comes to Hedera? I don't see why not because other projects out there, a lot of them, they're using traditional blockchain technology. Hedera Hashgraph uses a directed acyclic graph. If I was a developer and I wanted to launch like an AI project or I wanted to launch like blockchain gaming, whatever the case may be, sure, there could be options, let's say, for instance, in projects that use traditional blockchain technology. But when I take a look at something like Hedera, I don't see why it would be so bad, personally, in my opinion, because when I just take a look at the fundamentals, I just think a directed acyclic graph could be argued as just being better than, in some cases, traditional blockchain technology. Because in some cases, with these projects that use traditional blockchain technology, sometimes we see them lacking scalability. Sometimes they're not that fast. Many people would argue also on top of that, sometimes people would also say that, it's not very kind of like efficient in terms of its energy consumption. But through a directed acyclic graph, a bunch of these factors that are kind of lacking, it just kind of feels that it's not really there. Now, the main complaint though, when it comes to Hedera is that the adoption isn't the best. And I'll agree with that because if I think about the most famous project on Hedera, I'll think about Saucer Swap. But even if we take a look at Saucer Swap, which is a decentralized exchange, it's nowhere near as popular as even like the not that mainstream type of decentralized exchanges. Like for instance, we take a look at Avalanche, we'll see, something like Joe, we'll see something like Pangolin. Saucer Swap is not as popular as that, in my opinion, or should I say those two, right? And this may seem like, whoa, if Hedera is so good, why is that the case? Why is like Saucer Swap the most quote unquote popular one, but then it doesn't really have much attention in the grand scheme of things? Well, it's because I think oftentimes people are so used to traditional blockchain technology to the point that sometimes they're like, okay, why fix something that isn't necessarily broken? And look, the way I view it is that when it comes to traditional blockchain technology, I don't really see why it's bad. I mean, it's clearly working as of right now, but if something could be a little bit better, I just don't see why not. But then, in my opinion, to really gain that mass scale adoption, it might hypothetically take many years. This is just the way I take a look at it because let's face it, right? Is Hedera going to have more adoption than like a Solana, than like an Ethereum in the next 6 to 10 months? I just highly doubt that. I think arguably it's going to take years, but during a fully fledged type of bull run, people, from what I've seen, at least personally, sometimes they just don't care about the adoption. Like, for instance, if the main factor when it comes to Hedera is just the adoption, I don't think HBAR would have as big of a market cap as it does right now. You know what I mean? So then, as of right now, I think people more so care about the story, the narrative. And I do like the narrative when it comes to Hedera because I just think it's so unique. I just think it's different. And I think it brings a new approach to this space because usually I just think about traditional blockchain technology. But when I think about Hedera, it's a little bit different. So that is something that really I find just so unique within this space. And sometimes that is the criteria that many people do want to look for. However, I'm not telling anyone to do anything when it comes to HBAR. This is just from what I've seen in some cases when people want to find something unique or something interesting. I'm not saying people have to believe in Hedera, but that was kind of my mindset initially when I was taking a look at Hedera. But besides that point, when I take a look at something like Hedera, I think also another good use case maybe for it could be AI, right? I mean, if we take a look at these sort of developers that want to build, these AI projects on some, random layer one blockchain, let's say, sure, we've seen in a lot of cases that work out very well. But again, if let's say I was building an AI project, wouldn't I want it to be fast? Wouldn't I want it to be scalable? Wouldn't I want it to be something that's energy efficient? So in theory, if I was looking for the best fundamentals, not looking for the most amount of fans, because I'd probably, look at other options beyond Hedera. But let's say I wanted good fundamentals, I don't see why I wouldn't consider this as an option personally for me if I was a developer. Now, I am not a developer, by the way, but then this is just kind of me putting that type of mindset on because wouldn't I want something that is kind of, fundamentally, I would arguably say better in most cases when compared to a lot of its competition? So this is kind of like a no-brainer for me. I get it. Hedera is under some stiff competition nonetheless. Like, for instance, say, allegedly the world's fastest parallel blockchain, Sui, which is gaining a lot of momentum. Something like, also, for instance, Solana, which is already very massive. We also take a look at Ethereum, of course, right? The BNB chain is also still very massive. There's also Algorand, there's also Avalanche. There's a bunch. But then Hedera is just so unique because it's not like there are other projects out there that are kind of able to compete with Hedera because, simply put, a lot of them do use traditional blockchain technology. So it's kind of like an apples to oranges a little bit comparison. You know what I mean? If let's say there was 30 or 40 very popular projects out there that used a directed acyclic graph, now that's a different case at that point, right? Because at that point, Hedera might not be as special. But in this case, because it's so unique, I think it's a little bit, the way I take a look at it, sort of one of a kind due to its, I would say, fundamentals behind it. Now, let's say HBAR went to the price of $3. When it comes to this, I get it because not too long ago, HBAR wasn't doing good. I was talking about it. Everyone said, oh, you should have believed in this and that. But that was the past, right? And then eventually HBAR went up. I stayed put with HBAR. I didn't do anything. And then, of course, the price had a pullback and everyone's like, oh, man, HBAR is not good. They all kind of said this. At least I've seen a lot of cases to me. And then suddenly HBAR had a pretty good recovery, better than a lot of altcoins out there, in my opinion, which some people even consider somewhat reputable. HBAR, again, the recovery has been pretty okay. Now, it's not the level in which it once was, but then it's still not bad. This is the way you take a look at it. So when it comes to $3, I mean, if I had said HBAR $3, which hypothetically I was talking about that idea even back then, a lot of people thought, whoa, that's like impossible. But now $3 is around a 12x from here. So if I take a look at it, this doesn't seem too outlandish to me, maybe. Now, keep in mind, HBAR did that back then without really much of a catalyst, in my opinion. I mean, let's just think about this. Arguably, I would say that the most recent like pump, I'm not talking about this one, right? I'm talking about the one before when HBAR really did a good run. Was that a fully fledged type of altcoin season? I highly doubt that. What did Hedera do that was so revolutionary? I think it was just kind of the same, really. I mean, it didn't really do much at all in terms of like improving the fundamentals, in my perspective, in a sense where I don't think Hedera was drastically way better fundamentally at that price when compared to when I was first talking about it, you know? It was still kind of always the same, I guess, in a sense, like in terms of my perception. But then it just suddenly did that, right? So, in my opinion, if it was able to do that without much of a major catalyst, also on top of that, without really much of a altcoin season, really, the way you take a look at it, imagine what could Hedera maybe do now that we have more stuff coming out when it comes to Hedera, more updates. Also on top of that, if let's say we do see a fully fledged type of altcoin season, what we saw back then, you know, if let's say the next leg up maybe is better, that would not surprise me. This is just my perspective. Keep in mind, right, even $1.50 is around a 6x from here at this point, which I get it. Some people may be thinking, oh, you know, it's not like a 50x or whatever. I'm totally aware that HBAR is not a microcap or also not like a project with a very small market cap. That's not the case. So I think the days of maybe like, you know, 50x and all that type of stuff, I just don't think that maybe it is hypothetically possible in the next 6 to 10 months. But even besides all that, even around a 6x, I mean, let's just think about this. Is BNB doing a 6x? Is Solana doing a 6x in the next 6 to 10 months? You know, who knows? But their market cap is already very massive, right? Is Ethereum doing a 6x? Is Bitcoin doing a 6x from where it is as of right now in the next 6 to 10 months? I don't know about that. You know, this is just my perspective. So even HBAR at like $1.50, I would rather even believe in that idea maybe instead of like me going all into Bitcoin right now. This is just my perspective. Let alone like $3 again, which is around a 12x from here. But at the end of the day, all I can do is just really stay patient because if I take a look back in history, I'll see how usually altcoins, as a worst case scenario, they typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event. Now, the last Bitcoin halving event happened in April of last year, so we had 18 months on top of that. That's around October this year. Now, we're not in October yet, by the way, but yeah, I'm just saying. The way I take a look at it was that, you know, sure, that's based off history, but even if we go off that, maybe as a worst case scenario, altcoins, historically, at least based off that example, might not hypothetically peak right now anyways. This is the way I take a look at it. So whether or not it happens at that time, near the end of this year or the beginning of next year, only time will tell, but I'm still staying patient, holding, and just waiting. That's it. Because if, let's say, we maybe do see a fully fledged type of altcoin season, I just want to be, you know, holding and just dollar cost averaging, which is what I'm doing as of right now. I've been doing that consistently, but of course there has been up and down moments. But at the same time, you know, I just still stay patient because I am fully aware that I have no control over Hedera or whatever happens to the price. I have no control of that, right? I can only control myself really, and that is just me doing research, taking a look at projects that I find interesting, and just holding and just waiting. That's it. I mean, beyond that, there's really not much else to it. I mean, that's about it. But in the meantime, I just do focus on the updates when it comes to Hedera because at least that kind of brings me some joy, right? It kind of brings me some, you know, enthusiasm a little bit when I see a project updating that I do like. So again, I find that enjoyable news again when it comes to Aberdeen, when it comes to what, you know, that news I was talking about, RWAs earlier on the video. So again, overall, I do like it, but only time will tell. And again, yeah, that's pretty much it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I would greatly appreciate it. It's Willie the Captain. I'll catch you all in the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.